as a manager, you're never going to empower an employee if you don't believe in them. That's why you don't empower them. You don't believe
Absolutely.
in them. So
100%.
you have to, the micromanagement comes from a failure of belief. You don't believe that that person can do it.
That's right.
So you've
Lack
got
of
to tell them
trust.
everything. Right. Exactly. So you've got to trust them. You got to value them and you got to believe in them. You got to believe they can do it.
Welcome to this episode of Everything Communicates. My name is David Tushek. I'm the CEO of Everything Communications, and I'm sitting here today with Adam Zuckerman, my new friend from WTW. Adam Zuckerman is the global product leader at WTW, where he's been for the last 20 years, helping executives from some of the world's largest enterprises to better understand and improve the customer experience. And 25 years ago, he graduated with his doctorate in psychology. Adam Zuckerman, welcome. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, David.
I'll tell you, it's a pleasure because I've been following you now on LinkedIn, and you've got some really great posts on there.
Well, thanks very much. I've really enjoyed it. I've only been doing it for about 2 years. I joined LinkedIn years ago. I thought it was a job board like everybody else.
Yeah,
But it wasn't until the last couple of years that I really realized it was a social media platform in and of itself about the
yeah, it
workplace.
is.
So I started posting regularly and I've met some great people and learned a lot on the platform.
Yeah, it really is. It has boggled my mind how people don't really seem to get what a treasure it is. A wonderful community of like the smartest, most educated, most intelligent people are on LinkedIn, sharing experiences, sharing thoughts, sharing opinions, sharing best practices. I don't know why anybody who, cares about the role that they're in, who cares about their craft, isn't on there connecting with leaders and mentors and people who are practicing the same craft, people like you, a PhD in psychology. Why isn't every HR leader out there on LinkedIn following you and just, hearing your experiences and what you have to say? I don't get it.
Yeah, I agree. It is a great platform. And it's also, unlike most social media, it's very civil. Maybe because it's not anonymous or, it's less anonymous than most
Yes.
other platforms.
Yes.
But people are really, I see all the time differences of opinion and people are gracious about it. Hey, here's my view and thanks for contributing. Thanks for a comment. But I look at it differently. And very rarely do I see something flare up and get nasty. Rarely, if ever, frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest with you, I think I push that boundary more than most people that I ever see, right? It's a very safe place.
I think it's respectful. So I mean, as we'll chat, some of my views are different from others around the employee experience and culture and leadership, but people are all really always respectful, without exception. And I learn a lot. So to me, it's time well spent.
Well, I want to get into that. I want to get into what are some of the views that you have that are maybe different from what you're hearing out there. You've been in the space for, geez, all your career.
Yeah.
Employee experience is what you do. It's what you know. You're working for one of the leaders in employee experience. You have your doctorate in psychology. I'm pleased to pick your brain and to hear what do you think? What do you think about that is different, as you said, than what you hear out there? And I also wanted to hear about what do you think about, I mean, there's some big changes in the way people work, the way people want to work. This is fluid. This is happening right now, right? Big changes. Maybe companies that you're dealing with that are saying, yeah, I know we said that we would let you work from home indefinitely. I know we said that we would let you do this or we do that, but actually we're changing that back in the office,
Yeah.
right? Things are changing. It's fluid. You're having these discussions. It's all about the employee experience. Let's go. What do you think? What are your
Well,
thoughts?
it's a fascinating time to be in this space. I
Mm,
mean, it's always been interesting to me, but since COVID, it's really been fascinating because it has changed so quickly. And if
mm.
I look back at my career, it wasn't that long ago that most organizations are what I would call leadership focused. And by
Yeah.
that, I mean, it was all about an elite group of people at the top and they made all the decisions and being successful in that environment was understanding what they wanted and being able to deliver on it. That's not a particularly good idea for sustainable success. It wasn't then, it's certainly not now. I think it grew out of the sort of steep organizational hierarchies, Mad Men era kind of thing.
Mm.
And so that was already transitioning into probably from leadership focused to customer focused businesses,
Yeah.
which was sort of the next major
Yeah.
generation that I saw into the
Yeah.
80s and 90s. And I think that's a healthier focus, but still has its limitations. The Henry Ford, I would have given him a faster horse thing. So, there are limits to that. But now I really believe we are in an era where the best companies in the world aren't leadership focused or even customer focused; they're employee focused.
Mm.
To,
Yeah.
to me, that is the most sustainable basis of organizational performance. It's like being a seed focused farmer,
Yeah.
because I mean that's where it
That's
starts
where it starts.
with
Yeah.
with the employee.
It
And
really
I
does,
think
doesn't it?
I think there's greater recognition now of that than ever before. So it's a really exciting time to be a part of that. I do feel like an employee focused organization is the way to be successful. But I take that further than most. I don't think you can be too focused on the employee experience. I really don't. Some people would say, well, wait a minute, don't I need to balance employee needs with needs of the customer and needs of the community and needs of the shareholder? And I would say no.
Mm.
I would say the job is not to balance those, it's to align them. And I don't
Yeah.
think you can be too focused on providing a great experience. I really believe that the employee experience is the heart of it. Employees, they are the business. They're not just a part of the business, they are the business. And to improve the employee experience is to improve the business. So I take it a little bit further than most.
Yeah.
But I'm a true believer.
I absolutely love that. And I mean, I guess this is why I like your posts and why I wanted to have you on. But I'm absolutely a 100% believer in that as well. And I mean, I made this decision a while ago that I will only work for companies who are of that mindset and who do align to that, right? And I think that is, I mean, that's where top people want to go. Top people will only want to work for a place where they feel cared for and respected and prioritized,
Right.
and
Right.
prioritize. And I think a lot of CEOs, a lot of executives, a lot of VPs of their departments won't get this, what I'm about to say, but prioritized above the company, prioritized above the customer,
Correct.
prioritized above the shareholder.
Correct.
That's a
Correct.
crazy thought. And I think a lot of people would hear us saying that and say, what? Like,
Right. But it's not because those things are less important. I actually, it was so funny. I was driving my daughter to school the other day in the middle of rural Ohio. Believe it or not, I saw a sign that said "people over profits,"
Mhm.
and I thought, oh, that's kind of an odd thing to see. And it's also not quite right. It's not people over profits.
Mm.
It's people are how you get
That's how
profits.
you get them. Yes.
People deliver profits.
Yes.
So the more you focus on, I really believe that the better you treat people, the better it is for business. The
Yeah,
the the
absolutely.
the way you treat people and the better you treat people, the more successful you will be. So it's not just out of the goodness of my heart or because
Yeah.
I believe we should treat human beings well, which I do, but it's also because I've just seen so many times over and over again that when you treat people better, they work harder, they treat customers better, they don't turn over, they do everything you
Yeah.
need to build a successful business. So to me, that's where it starts.
100%. And so I'm just looking for it now because I had actually just today, I had a post and sometimes I have some decent posts and today I thought it was a good one. And I wrote something on it. I'm like, that's a keeper. That's a keeper statement. So it was in regards to back to office, right? And I've got some strong opinions on it. And there's two thoughts that I've been playing with recently. One is that it is all about your customer, actually. It's just that your employees are your first customer,
Right.
right?
That's General Mattis, Mad Dog Mattis,
Mhm.
said something along the lines of, there's one battle, and the battle is for the hearts and minds of our soldiers.
Yeah,
That's the battle.
that's the
And
battle.
they will win whatever other battle we need them to win.
Right. That's it.
Absolutely.
That's it. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And so this idea the post was about return to office and some, and I want to get into this with you as well, but
Yeah.
some of these big players are saying enough is enough, come back into the office, right?
Right.
The CEO of Amazon came out and he said that yeah, this may not be for you, but come back into the office. And if like he's just had it, he's like,
Right.
because employees are refusing to go back in. They're like,
Right.
no, I don't want that anymore.
This is such a tough issue. First of all, it's ironic that Amazon is a company that benefited so much from people staying at home. But
Yeah.
I do get the perspective. I mean, first of all, I love working from home. I save a tremendous amount of time. I can work out during the day. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I'm way more productive.
Tons of benefits.
Uh, but I understand it too. I think the future is hybrid. But I mean, my
Hybrid.
view on this is one of the underappreciated benefits of going to the office is not just collaboration and the social
Mhm,
interaction, which is great,
mhm,
but it's also attention. Like if you're on a Zoom meeting, it's almost impossible
mhm.
not to sneak a look at email or
Yeah.
another task or
Yeah.
social. I mean, even if you
Agreed.
are actively participating in the
Yeah.
meeting,
Yes.
it is
Guilty.
almost impossible not to multitask a little bit,
Guilty. Yes.
right? And you would never do that in an office. I mean, in an
True.
office, you're not going to open up your computer and just start doing something else. And so it's forced attention, which is I think one of the many benefits of the office. And there are many. So I think the future is hybrid. I think
Yeah.
there's a 2 to 3 day a week
Days.
place where we're probably going to wind up. But I also think one of the things that we've learned, I hope we don't lose, is not just is it can I work from home or can I work at the office, but can we change the office to make it more humane? Like there's no
Mhm.
reason that I can't work out during the day, even if I'm at the office, because it only takes me an hour
Right.
from start to finish. That's
Yeah.
including a shower,
Yeah.
right? So
Right.
that's just like another meeting.
That's right.
I mean, even to push it further than most would be comfortable with, I mean, there's no reason I can't take a nap. I could take a
Yeah.
20-minute nap,
Yeah.
but still work at the office, right? So as
Yeah.
long as I schedule it, I just think we can make the office a lot more humane.
Absolutely. 100%.
Um, and one of the things I think that's gone against that is this sort of environment where you just grab a desk and it's all
Hoteling.
sort of yeah. I mean, I see the benefits of that from real estate cost perspective, but people like to have their own space. It's human.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think there's things we can do to make the office more humane, and I think ultimately it'll be a sort of a hybrid is probably where we're headed.
Yeah, I agree. And I also agree that there are many benefits of going into an office. And I understand why the CEO of Amazon and all these, large companies are, I don't understand why they're forcing it. I understand why they want it. I understand why
Yeah,
they want their people to come in. Better collaboration, better connection, better engagement. And listen, if you and I were in person for this, that would be better than this, right?
right,
This is
right,
great. We've got technology here. We use Zoom, and so I can make it look like we're sitting here in person, right? But that is not as good as in person.
right,
But I get it. I get the desire for it. I disagree with forcing them to do something that they clearly are uninterested in doing. And that's my
right,
point that I was driving at with that example is that um this idea that I don't care if you don't want this. You're coming into the office. So number one, my idea was that your employees are your first customers. And number two, delivering what people want is business. That is your business. It should be your business. Like, what
right,
are you doing in business where you're not delivering what people want?
right, right.
Right. That includes your first customer, your employees.
Exactly, exactly.
Am I wrong?
So no, you're completely right. So I mean, the way I articulate that is I've come up with a way of sort of structuring my thinking around it, and in my view, a really employee focused company today is one where employees feel heard,
Mm-hmm.
valued,
Mm-hmm.
believed in, and inspired.
Yeah.
And those
Yeah.
are kind of the four components to it I've found. And if you have those four things in place, then you have employees who are having a good experience, and you're going to be successful. And there's a lot of complexities around each of those and how they actually play out. But exactly right. This kind of mandate seems to be going against that sort of philosophy.
It really does, doesn't it? So I think it's for that reason, and maybe check out my post if you like. But I think for that reason, it's short-sighted. The essence of my post is essentially that yes, when it's an employer's market, yeah, you can do those things. You can force your people in, right? And you'll win that battle, and they will come in. And some of them will quit. And if you're okay with some of your top people quitting, then you're okay with your top people quitting. But to do something that is so unpopular, to not listen, it's not even that they're not listening because they know. They
Right.
just don't care, right?
Right.
Because they're not putting their employees
See
first.
that right. That's the thing. It's actually that's why I was quite intentional about the words. It's really about being heard and valued. So
Valued.
they're
Yeah.
absolutely listening, right?
Yeah.
Question is they're obviously not making people feel heard.
Mm.
And they're definitely not making people feel valued.
Valued,
And
right?
that's the distinction.
That's yeah, and I'm saying that that's the problem if you're interested as a CEO at all in longevity. And this is true of everybody in the workplace, but it's especially true, I think, of the younger generations. The younger generation, what
Yes.
do they want? They don't want to just clock into a job and stay there for the next 20, 30, 40 years like the boomers did. Like
Right.
some of Gen Xers did. Like that's not even that popular with my generation, our generation as Gen
Right.
Xers, let
Right.
alone millennials, let alone Gen Z. So if you have any ideas of sustainability for your business, this idea that you're just not going to care or value what your most important stakeholders for your business, your first customers think or care or want, like, yeah, you'll win the battle. You'll get some of them to come in,
Right.
but you've lost them. You have, I think, listen, I might be wrong. I want to hear what you're the expert, but I think you've lost them. They'll get them in for the week or two or three, but they're job hunting and they're at their first opportunity to join a company that not even so much that gives them, lets them work from home 2 or 3, 4 days a week, whatever they want. It gives them the technology, which is what we do, gives them the technology to do that. But most importantly, that cares for them and values them.
Right.
That's the
And
company that they'll go to.
exactly. That makes them feel heard, valued, believed in, and inspired. Absolutely. It's completely consistent with how I view the world. And you asked me about some of the other takes that are maybe a little bit different from what others are doing or how they think about the space. I mean, it starts the first one is feeling heard, and there's sort of two components to that. One is obviously individually, one-on-one leaders and individuals, and part of good listening is skill, and part of it, I think, the more important part is will. You have to really care about what people are saying. You have to want to hear what they're saying,
You do,
right?
don't you?
I think you do. And that took me a long time because the skills are the easy part. The
Yeah,
skills you can get on
yeah,
YouTube
yeah,
or whatever, repeat what people say,
yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
focus, tension. But it's the will. And I think the will comes with recognizing that a lot of listening is not just information exchange, it's connection,
It is. Yeah,
right? So like my wife used to tell me stuff all the time. I'd say, yeah, I got it. Cause I did get it. Cause I didn't need to hear all the details. I got the headline. But the thing is, it wasn't about what I needed to
yeah,
know. She needed to tell me. And the same is true in the workplace, right?
yeah.
It's like, listening is not just getting information, it's connecting. And
It
sometimes
is.
people need to tell you what they need to feel heard, and
Yeah.
they need to tell you those details, and you need to listen. So that's a
And
big part of feeling heard.
it really is, isn't it? I mean, and I had another guest, and I think you would enjoy watching the show, Enrico Bascaro.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Have you heard of
I
him?
follow him.
You
Yes.
follow him on LinkedIn, yes.
Yeah.
So there
Yeah.
you go, right? So great
Yeah.
leaders who have great thoughts, and so he wrote a book on resonance and the power of resonance. So what you're talking about there, he would call resonance. The idea of really connecting with people. Really, it's and I name my company Everything Communications, not because we do everything in communications, but because we believe that communication is everything. But actually, after I met with him, I realized, you know what? If I'm really honest about it, communication isn't really everything. Resonance
Right.
is everything.
Right.
Communication is the means
Yes.
to connection.
I would call it
Connection,
connection, resonance. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
Totally.
exactly. Communication is simply
Yeah.
the means
Right.
to the
Right.
resonance. But the resonance is the thing. What your wife was looking for was you to resonate, to like really get her, not to hear the words and blah blah blah,
Right.
but to know, like, get how I'm feeling,
Right.
get the world that I'm living in and what
Right.
it's like for me right now, and empathize with that and care,
Right.
value me and care.
Right.
Give a
It's
damn.
not listening so I understand.
No,
It's listening so you feel understood.
that's right.
And that's the key difference. So part of hearing, when I say employees feel heard, valued, believed, and inspired, part of heard is that individual part. But part of it is also, and this is another part that I'm really passionate about,
Mm,
is listening at scale. And
mm, yeah.
that is usually done through employee surveys. And employee surveys get a mixed rap today. I think probably because a lot of the ways that they're implemented aren't
Mm.
as well as they should be, but it's a tremendous tool. It's extremely valuable when done well. So I'm a big believer in employee surveys because individual conversations just don't scale. If you've got a 50,000 person organization,
Yeah.
you can have real great individual conversations, but ultimately there's no way to scale that at one time unless you use some kind of listening technique like an employee survey. So I'm a big proponent of employee surveys and all the value they bring.
Yeah, 100%. I am as well. And the reason that I am is, again, I named the company Everything Communications because I truly believe that everything that you want in your life with your spouse, with your children, with your family, with your friends, with your colleagues, with your customers, in your career, everything that your company wants with their customers and employees, everything is created through communication and and resonance, getting on the same wavelength as other people, getting on the same wavelength as your employees, getting on the same wavelength as your customers. And you do that through communication, and you cannot communicate well without listening. To me, it's the most critical part. So what I'm doing in our company, we're a communications technology broker. So we go out there and we source the best technologies that companies should have, and so I've got my list that I'm putting together of top things that companies should be doing in 2023. And one of those things is listening to your employees, especially during this time where everybody's working from home. People are scattered. They're out there. They're already feeling disconnected, and this is kind of their own doing. This is why CEOs are trying to bring them back, forcing them into doing what's right for them,
Yeah.
right? Because they don't know better. But people want the things that the office provides. They want the connection. Everybody wants to connect with other people. Everybody wants, maybe not everybody. I think so. There's probably some people who are watching. No, those people who don't want that, they're actually not watching this. I take that back.
That's right. That's right.
Right. But everybody wants to connect with people. Everybody wants to feel heard. Everybody wants to resonate, to go to a place, to work for a place where they can practice their craft, do their best work. They just don't want to commute for an hour and a half to go do that, or an hour,
Right.
or even 45 minutes.
Right.
They want the tools and the technology to be able to do their best work, and the trust. I think trust is huge. They want the trust to be able to do their best work from anywhere. And you can't create any of it without communication, which is listening,
Right.
largely listening. It's not, you can come and tell your employees all the reasons why they need to come into the office. But if you're not listening to them and what they want and creating what they want,
Right.
lost, in
Right.
my opinion.
Absolutely. No, completely agree.
Yeah.
And so, huge fan of employee surveys for exactly that reason, because it's listening at scale. There's a lot of ways to get it wrong,
Yeah.
but when you get it right, it can bring tremendous value. But some of the ways, for example, that I found that mistakes that companies make, there's a few of them that are pretty common, and these are also, I think, some differences between how I view the field and maybe others do. One of them is treating EX like CX.
Okay. Tell me
So
more.
so it's a popular view now to be like, well, employees are just like another customer. So let's study them the same way and let
That's, I
them
mean, that's
respond.
what I said. I said, this is your first customer.
Okay, right. Okay, right. So, in my experience, customers are very different from employees.
Mhm.
I think we make the confusion a lot because we use some of the same techniques to study them, surveys or focus groups or whatever. But the reality is that an employee relationship with an employer is very different than a customer relationship. An
Sure.
employee relationship is obviously far more enduring. Most customer relationships are highly transactional.
Mm.
Most customers, you can leave one provider and go to another pretty easily. It's not so easy to pick up and go to another job.
Mm.
And so they're a different entity. And
Mhm.
when you survey employees, you have to think about it differently. There's the issue of confidentiality. Employees are often reluctant to tell you what they really think for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
Customers usually they
Sure.
don't really care. Employees have a stake in you getting the feedback and improving the company.
Mhm.
Customers sometimes, but it's not really the
Mhm.
same.
Mhm.
Employees live in these things called organizational hierarchies, which are quite complex in terms of how we report them and all that. That doesn't exist for customers. And just the way we interpret the results. I mean, do you know that for EMPS, which is a classic example of something that's migrated from customer to employee? I think,
Yes.
unfortunately, there's some gain to it, but in general, I'm not a big proponent of what we call ENPS
Oh, okay.
because we've just adapted the scoring. You know that
Mhm.
in 8 out of 10 is considered neutral, passive.
Mhm.
Now, in the customer world, that may be because you want those nines and tens if they're going to come back. In an employee world,
Mhm.
if I ask you what do you think of your company and you give me an 8 out of 10,
Mhm.
that's a pretty good experience.
Sure. Yeah.
That's a pretty good. So it's a different calibration, it's a
Mhm.
different understanding, it's a different experience. So I think that's been a little bit of a unfortunate um, trend,
Mhm.
which is just to see employees as any other customer. We can learn a lot from the two groups impact one another tremendously. The tools can be linked together so we can learn if the employees have a better experience, customers tend to have a better experience. All that is true, but they're not the same. And so they require different expertise and different understanding if we try to improve in either case.
Hmm.
So that's
Yeah.
one.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Another is, and this is one I think we might have touched on also too already before we started, which is around the role of the manager.
Mm.
So
Yes.
probably the single biggest
Your
mistake,
post.
yes, probably the biggest single mistake in my view is overemphasizing the role of the manager. The manager is very important in the employee experience, no doubt about it.
Mhm.
But,
Oh yeah.
but
Huge.
yes, but uh, over the last, I would say 20 years, it's been sort of a common view that the manager is synonymous with the employee experience. And that is quite clearly not true in the data that I've seen, and the research that I've done, and just in my own experience.
Mhm.
Um, uh, the manager, people say people join companies but leave managers.
Mhm. Mhm.
The reality is they don't leave managers, they leave companies because those managers work in companies.
Well, sure.
And those managers were hired by someone in the company and
Right.
trained by somebody in the company and developed by
Right.
somebody in the company and rewarded by somebody. And that company has a culture. The
Right.
company has other colleagues, development opportunities. And so the manager is critical in filtering a lot of that, but
Mhm.
not exclusively in my experience.
Mhm. Mhm.
So while the manager has a big role to play, I think it's too easy. I think
But
it's an excuse that a
it's
lot of
the
that a lot of companies say.
yeah, to me, my interpretation of it, I mean, you're not wrong, but it's like it's the tip of the spear that's pinching you is the manager, right? It's
Right.
yes, the manager is supported by the rest of the organization that has placed that manager in there, but the one that is not hearing you, the one that is not caring for you, the one that is not nurturing, the
See,
one that's not inspiring you is oftentimes not the company itself behind it. It's that tip of the spear, no?
so here's why I push back a little
Hmm.
bit. Um, the uh, the reality is that the if we're trying to understand the employee experience and improve it, I think it's too easy
Hmm.
to blame the manager.
Okay.
And what that does is it sort of cuts off our analysis at that spear point,
Hmm.
and it prevents us from really understanding what's going on.
Yeah, no,
It's too
sure.
easy to blame. It's too easy to blame the manager, and you know who loves the manager explanation the most are leaders,
Yeah,
because then
right.
leaders say, well, I don't have to change anything I'm doing.
Just
Just
fire
replace
them.
these damn managers. Exactly. Or retrain the managers. And that's a tremendous disservice. I think most organizations today are overmanaged and underled. And it's leaders who don't step up and take accountability and responsibility for their role in shaping the employee experience directly and indirectly through managers.
Yeah.
So I think leaders have as big or a bigger role to play than managers. In fact, in the research that we've done, what we've seen is that most employees who are exclusively focused on the manager are actually more junior employees or lower performing employees. The highest performing employees aren't looking at the manager; they're looking at the manager's manager. They're looking
Mm,
at the CEO. They're looking at where the company is going. They know their manager isn't going to be their manager for very long
right.
because they're moving up and they're
Right.
changing roles and they're
Yeah.
learning.
Mm-hmm.
The worst performing employees are all about what the manager's not doing for me, what he
Mm-hmm.
or she isn't giving me, what he or
Mm-hmm.
she isn't telling me, he or she isn't giving me the right schedule. That is the lament of the underperforming employee.
Wow.
So
Yeah,
so
that's interesting.
when
I
we
don't know
look
that
at
a lot
employee
of people know
experience
that.
data, yeah, when we look at employee engagement data, what they think of leadership. Leadership is one huge factor. Career development opportunities is another huge factor. Those tend to be as or more important than what they think of the manager.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, in my view, I've done a lot of posts on this. In my view, blaming the manager is like blaming the waiter for a bad restaurant. It's ignoring the food and the prices and the decor and the location. it's like blaming a flight attendant for a bad flight and
Mhm.
ignoring the luggage and the scheduling and everything else about it. It's the most salient part,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
it's the easiest one to overemphasize. And it's not until we go beyond the manager to really
Yes.
understand what's going on in the organization that we
Yeah.
can really understand and improve the employee experience. So that's
Yeah.
I know not everybody agrees with me on that, but I'm pretty passionate about it.
I love the passion on that, and I think you're right. I think that, I mean, just take the waiter example, right? If you've got a waiter who's a horrible waiter who's treating you horribly, you know, there, when I think about horrible waiters, I think about this one particular waiter that I had, and I've never had a waiter like her. And it's kind of like politics too. People complain about politics, and the leader in charge, and I'm like, who put that leader in charge? They don't, leaders don't elect themselves, in not in your country, not in my country, right? The waiter didn't hire herself.
Right. The waiter exists in a system that hired that person and rewarded and
Trained,
developed and trained and
expectations.
exactly. And in my view, it's too easy to say. That's really what I'm really saying is it's just too easy to say it's the manager. And people might say, okay, it's more complicated than that, but as a shorthand, it's good enough. But it's not good enough because what it leads to, in my experience, is firing good managers or retraining
Yeah.
managers who that's not what they need. And there's nothing against manager training, but my point is that you have to take a broader view and look deeper inside the organization.
Yeah.
And this overemphasis of the manager, I think, is an inhibitor to that progress.
So I'm a big fan of root problem analysis. And working for Eric Yuan was a fantastic experience. This is one of the things that he taught me. I've been very privileged to work at several companies that had, as I mentioned, I sought out to work for great companies who put employees first. And Zoom was one of those. Return Path was another. Matt Blumberg, Eric Yuan. Um, Eric Yuan had this thing, root problem analysis. Always get to the root problem. Why? Why?
Right,
Right?
right.
So, that's what I'm hearing you say. Right?
Yes.
It's not good enough just to say,
It's a symptom. It's
it's a
often a
symptom.
symptom, right?
Yeah.
It can be the root problem, but it's just as often, in my experience, the symptom.
Mm.
And I think it cuts off our analysis at the first step.
Yes.
So that's what really frustrates me about overemphasizing the role of the manager.
Yeah. 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 I agree. I get that. Yeah.
So the mistakes companies make in listening to employees and helping them feel heard in employee surveys. One is around overemphasizing the role of the manager. One is around um, treating EX like CX. Another is just will surprise nobody, underemphasizing action. Like there's a lot of people who do surveys and they don't act on them,
Yeah.
and that's a big problem.
Is that not the
Um,
biggest problem? I
it
mean, other
probably
than
is
not doing it. If you don't do it, that's
right.
the biggest problem. But if you
Well,
do it
actually,
and don't,
right, but actually, I argue that it's better not to do it than
it's
to do it and
yeah,
not
no, I
take it.
agree. It's
Right,
better
right,
not to
right.
do it than to do it and not listen and not or not take action. Yeah.
100%. So, I mean, in my experience, there's a few basic things to keep in mind around taking action. I mean, one is less is more. If you just do a few things in response to an employee survey, you'll get a dozen things that you could work on, or 2 dozen. Any company is going to uncover all kinds of muck.
Yeah.
But if you identify one, two, just a couple of things, and you really drive them, and you
Yeah.
really take action, the whole effort is worthwhile. The whole initiative is worthwhile many times over. So focus is a big thing that I preach when looking at employee survey results because it's easy to get distracted. It's easy for leaders to feel like, well, I guess I got to address the 100 things that this survey has uncovered. The reality is you don't.
Mm.
If you just identify one or two big pivotal
The big
items
ones.
and you make progress, it has a huge impact. So that's one thing. Another is just too often organizations say, well, we see these problems, but there's really nothing we can do about it. We've got these challenges, but they just are what they are, right? And that's, I think, another area that's just so frustrating for me because that just tells me you haven't defined the problem well enough. I come from probably a similar school as you, where a well-defined problem is its own solution, right? If you don't have a solution, you haven't really defined the problem well enough. So I think whether it's through analytics
Mhm.
or focus groups or benchmarks, other kinds of tools, the effort is understanding the problem is worthwhile to really get to the nub of it so you can drive a solution.
Yeah, and there's a really great graphic for this. there's actually two things that come to my mind. Maybe I'll put them both up on the screen here. But there's I mean, this is an iceberg. Your leaders don't know most of the problems happening in your organization, right? And so if you really want to know, and listen, and I've been there. This is how I'm wired, right? I'm a problem solver. I'm always looking to optimize, just in my life, through like everywhere. Always, I'm always looking for better ways to do anything, right? So of course, I work for a company that I really care about, and that's I only work for companies that I really cared about. Of course, I'm going to be looking for ways to optimize and create and improve, right? What I learned is that not everybody wants to hear that, right? Your managers, they might not know what to do with that. They might
Right.
not, they might not have bandwidth for that, right? Directors, VPs, right? They might just want to placate you, might want to just sweep things under the rug. Talk about that. I mean, that's a big problem, don't you think?
Well, that's why I think surveys are so valuable, not because they necessarily expose what you didn't know. They do that to some extent, but they make it known that now you know.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
right. So employees now know that you know what the issues are.
Yes. Yes.
And it's only, what was famous saying, not everything that is confronted can be solved, but nothing can be solved until it's confronted.
Yes.
And data it forces you to confront
Yeah.
those issues and those challenges and be seen to confront them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's a huge part of the value in employee survey too.
100%. I mean, I'm just thinking about a particular situation that I faced when I found a problem and brought, I mean, it was a big problem. It was a very big problem for one of the companies. And I mean, it was a major decline in one of the, most important metrics. And I brought it up, brought it up to my manager, brought it up to a director, brought it up to a VP. And, I brought it up. It wasn't the best meeting that I brought it up in, but that was my fault. But I had already brought it up two other times, two other people, and I brought it up in this meeting where we were being asked to share what ideas we had, and I'm like, I got an idea, so I shared it. It was a mistake, but when the director said, if you really feel like that, you should quit. If you
Really.
really like, it's if you're not bought in to what we're doing here, and like,
Uh,
I'm bought in. I see the problem that I'm not sure everybody sees, and I think I want to expose it, bring it up, and like, can we look at this, please? Can we work on it, right? And it's just I don't know what leadership sees. Like, nobody's coming to me saying, "Hey guys, we see this. Don't worry about it." I know that I see it. I know that I'm hearing it every day, and that I'm seeing it, and I'm looking at it every day. This is what I'm saying, like this iceberg
so
analogy, right?
right, but that is so destructive. It's funny because I posted on that not long ago where I said there's a special place in hell for leaders who see any reasonable objection as coming from not a team player.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so destructive. I mean, to me, that's the sort of Steve Jobs syndrome. And can candidly, I think there's been Steve Jobs was a genius, obviously, but the idolization of Steve Jobs, I think, has actually done a lot of damage,
Mm-hmm.
which is another view that may not be shared by many. But that's where you get this, and in worst cases, you get the Theranos thing and these other kinds of things where any objection is like, well, you're not bought in,
Right.
and that's so destructive.
Yeah.
I've got this amazing vision, and it doesn't matter how ridiculous it is or how impractical it is. I just need to keep pushing it. This is the lesson because I'm Steve Jobs, right?
Yeah.
Everyone tells me no, but it's going to be yes because the vision is that great and is that bold and is that powerful. Maybe you might be Steve Jobs,
Mm-hmm.
but chances are you're not,
Mm-hmm.
right? Chances are some of those objections are worth hearing and worth listening to and
Yeah.
taking seriously, right?
I
I
mean,
mean,
at least that, right? At least look at it, at least say, and that's the other thing I want to put up is it's a diagram of a problem solving process. And I think this is one of the things that's just missing in business is a proper process. So it's one thing, to not listen, yes, every company should listen, let's say. It's another thing to not take action. And we both agree every company should take action or don't even bother listening at all. Don't
right,
even bother serving.
correct.
but then what do you do with it? And having, I think it's critical, having a proper problem solving process that can enable people, from managers to leadership to the people, probably your front level people who are the ones probably finding the problems,
Right.
enabling them to not just be heard, but be a participant in helping
Right.
to solve the problem, which
Right.
is probably all that they want,
Correct.
right?
Correct. And that's what I think, that's what a healthy listening program, which is usually an organizational survey of some kind, can do when
Mhm.
it's, confidential and
Right.
trusted and acted on. That's exactly what it can do. So heard is the key part of the whole deal, right? They got to feel heard.
Yeah.
And then the other components are feeling valued, believed in, and inspired. So valued is I think a close cousin of her, and it's getting what you're saying. You bring up, hey, I've got a concern, or this is a problem. Well, maybe this isn't the place for you. Obviously, you don't feel valued, and that's such a critical component. I think the not only is listening a critical aspect of helping people feel valued, but it's telling them the truth.
Yes.
And when you tell people the truth and all of the truth, it's amazing how they feel trusted, they feel
Yeah.
valuable, they
Yeah.
trust you back,
Yes.
and it changes everything. And so I think that's a big part of helping employees feel valued, which is being as transparent as you can possibly be. Sometimes you can't, there's legal issues, and there's circumstances to protect people's privacy. Obviously, we have to be careful, but in general, I think we should force ourselves to be much more transparent than is
So
typically the case.
perhaps just to get very specific about this, because it might be helpful for people, maybe not as transparent as you can possibly be, but as transparent as you can reasonably be, and really thinking carefully about where you're not being transparent and having communication about that. We This is where we're not going to be transparent, and here's why, and let's all agree that this isn't, like to that level of scrutiny and detail, right? Because
Correct.
I think that's an important distinction, because some people are going to hear that, you be as transparent as possible, and I think a lot of people are going to blow that off and say, that's there's many things that I'm not going to be transparent about. Do you agree?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
No, I think you're right. I mean, our lines might be in different places, but I think, first of all, I think you're right that a lot of people will dismiss it, unfortunately. But
Mm.
I think that's really what I'm saying, which is that we need to put pressure on ourselves,
Yeah.
um, to be as transparent as we can be, and to
Mhm.
understand, if we're not, why we're not.
Yes.
Because the reality is that, first of all, employees know when you're not fully transparent.
Yeah.
You're not really fooling anybody.
Yeah.
Something gets out eventually. It always gets out, and you just always benefit. I mean, there's so many cases where I've seen organizations benefit. I know one organization quite well that was moving a function offshore, and they told the people in that function months before they really had to, that move was happening, and that effectively their jobs were going away. They didn't have to tell them, but they
Mhm.
did.
Yep.
And it was a great risk because, there was a little financial incentive for those people to stick around, but not much if they had another opportunity. Yet all of them did.
Mhm.
And the reason they did is not necessarily because they were in love with the company, but they cared about their clients, and they cared
Mhm.
about their colleagues,
Mhm.
and they knew that they would be leaving those people in a bad situation
Yeah.
if they left.
Yep.
But the only reason they even thought about it that way is because the company was honest with them and said,
Yes.
"These are the financials. This is the situation. This function doesn't make sense at this location anymore. We're going to move it offshore, and this
Mhm.
is the timing. And
Mhm.
we hope you stay with us as
Yeah.
long as you can. And here's something to tide you over,
Mhm.
because it won't be easy."
Yeah.
That was the right thing to do. And there were plenty of people who said, "That's crazy. We
Yeah.
shouldn't announce this until the absolute last minute.
Right.
These people are going to walk out the door, and we're going to be in a terrible spot." I mean, that's
Mhm.
a great example to me where, transparency was not the obvious call, but it was the right call.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think setting a very high bar for where you're not going to be transparent,
Yes,
I think is where we're agreeing.
right. Be authentic, err on the side of transparency
Yeah.
whenever you can.
Hmm.
Raise the bar in terms of how transparent you can be,
Hmm.
and ask yourself, if you aren't being fully transparent, why? Is there really a good reason for it?
Hmm. Yeah.
Because when you're open with employees and truthful with employees, it's a sign that you trust them.
Mhm.
And when you trust them, they feel valued and they trust you back.
Yeah,
I think that's critical to helping employees feel valued today.
100%. Yeah, I two things have become my pillars for life. I talk a lot and think a lot about creating the life that I want. We got one life to live, and I'm here to create the happiest life that I want. And a lot of that is, well, figuring out what I want, which is, I think, is a big problem that people fail to do. I think that's an important step, figuring out what do we want in life, right? But then once we figure it out, to create it. But there's two pillars, two things that I use to do that, to create what I want. Authentic communication and trust. These are my two pillars that I use to create everything that I want in life. And I've just, in all my conversations, it just keeps coming around to the same two things. And this is what I'm hearing here in this conversation: authentic communication and trust.
Those are other words for exactly how I think about the first two components: heard and valued. Heard is authentic communication, and valued is really trusted. I mean, that's what it means to be valued in a lot of ways. Um, and so, yeah, I completely agree that those are true in life, and they're true in an organizational
Yeah,
setting as well with employees.
yeah, for sure, 100%. So why don't people do it? Why isn't every company, every CEO, why don't they have some sort of a technology that allows them to listen at scale?
Well, I think the best ones do actually. More and more than ever before.
Mhm.
But it's effortful. I mean, a lot of organizations would like to say, well, if we're going to survey our employees, and it's going to take a lot of time, and we're going to have to analyze the results, and we're going to have to be faced with some tougher decisions.
Find our
It,
problems, listen to
exactly,
our employees, solve the
exactly,
problems. That's a lot of work.
exactly. So I think it's sort of short-term thinking, because it isn't necessarily going to be going to feel good in the short term, even though it's a no-brainer long term. But that's probably a big reason for it.
Okay, so heard, valued, believed in, and inspired.
Believed in is a really critical one. Believed in is the standard for me there is also quite high, which is, I think you really need to believe in employees more than they even believe in themselves. The power of belief is incredible. And in my experience, consistently, employees will act as you lead them, right? You lead them as high performers, they will perform
Yeah,
in an exceptional way.
yeah.
And my favorite study on this is Bob Rosenthal's Pygmalion in the classroom work. This goes back to the 1960s,
Mm.
where he was a Harvard psychologist, and he went into a local public school in the Boston area, I think it was, and he gave some tests to the students. These are grade school students, and he told the teachers that certain students, based on his testing, were about to break out academically, and he identified the names of those kids confidentially to the teachers. And he came back the next year, and in fact, those kids had excelled academically on standardized tests. Of
Mhm.
course, they were chosen randomly. There was no real authenticity to his evaluation. In other
What? Sorry?
words, that's right. So the teachers believed that these
Oh,
students
what?
were
Oh,
about to
really?
break, yes, were about to break out academically. And that
Oh,
was the only difference between those students and the others.
wow.
That's called the Pygmalion in the classroom. It's like a famous study from the 1960s. And it's been replicated over and over again in a variety of different settings. The power of belief is
Yeah.
tremendous. That's why I say, if employees act and perform how you lead them.
Right.
So that's why I think belief is so critical. And people say, well, what if I want to believe in my employees, but I really don't, because they don't have it. I don't see it. And I would say to them, you're not looking hard enough. I would say to them, they got into your company. Everybody's great at something. You just need to find it.
Mm.
I would assume that if you don't see it, you haven't looked hard enough. I mean, there are cases where it's a bad
Yeah.
fit, where someone's gonna have to
Yeah.
move on. But
Yeah.
but too often,
Mm.
I had a post that said, people think a great company is when employees believe in leaders. I think a great company is when leaders believe in employees. So I think that there is no substitute for belief as a really critical part of creating a great employee experience.
Interesting. And that really comes back to what we were talking about earlier with getting to the root problem, right? Like if a manager thinks, let's say a survey was done and a team is just really unhappy, not whatever. The survey results say that, let's just call it unhappy. It's easy to point a finger at the manager,
Right.
but actually, if we dig deeper, we can find out, well, what's going on there. And, it'd be interesting to hear what the manager thinks. Well, the manager thinks that, oh, this person is this and that person's
Right.
that. But actually, what's going on is that there's no belief in the person. Maybe the manager doesn't value the.
Right. Well, so I mean, oftentimes, the manager gets the employees that they deserve. I mean, you get the employees that you manage, right? In other words, so that the managers are part of that equation. It's not a separate entity, right? I mean, the manager creates the environment and the leader creates the environment for performance. And if a team isn't performing, you don't fire the team. You look at the manager, or you look at the leader, you look at the coach, and you say, what's going on in this environment? And so a big part of success in my experience with employees and creating a great employee experience is believing in employees, believing not just in what you want them to be, but believing in what they want to be, finding out
Yeah.
what's important to them, what
Yes.
they can do, and then
Yeah.
finding a way to bring that into the
Yeah.
organization, to let them be that thing in the
Yeah.
organization.
Yeah, I mean that really resonates with me as I'm thinking back through some of my the companies that I've worked for. And again, being somebody who only works for companies that I really believe in and seeks out great companies, and then puts everything that I have into them. Um, yeah, just thinking through some of that, it's that resonates.
See, I think the greatest leaders have vision, and not just vision for the company or the market, but vision for employees. So, John's a salesman, but one day John could run the region, right? Mary's my assistant, but Mary could be a VP, right? Mary could be the head of operations. Like, what's the vision for your employees? What's the growth trajectory for your employees? Leaders are focused on growth. Oftentimes, I think it's the wrong kind of growth. It's
Mm,
revenue growth. If you're focused on
mm.
employee growth,
Yes.
that's what produces revenue growth.
I was just thinking the exact same thing. Yeah. Yeah.
So that
Thinking
comes
back
from
through some of
belief.
the,
But if you don't believe in your employees, you're never going to think about them in any other role other than the one they're
yeah.
currently in. If you
Yeah, so
don't
there you go.
believe,
So
right,
again, getting to the root problem, what is the root problem in that scenario is that you've got a
exactly.
manager who's not been, but doesn't that come down to training or something like that? Or like it's their mindset. They're
I
focused on.
think I think it is a lot of mindset. I think yeah, I mean, look, again and again, we see on employee surveys that another big factor, in addition to things like leadership or supervision or career development opportunities, a big factor in employee surveys that drives employee commitment, is empowerment. Employees feeling empowered to
Yeah,
make decisions, to grow and to learn and to take on more responsibility. As a manager, you're never going to empower an employee if you don't believe in them. That's why you don't empower them. You don't believe
absolutely.
in them. So
100%.
you have to, the micromanagement comes from a failure of belief. You don't believe that that person can do it.
That's right.
So you've
Lack
got
of
to tell them
trust.
everything. Right. Exactly. So you've got to trust them. You got to value them, and you got to believe in them. You got to believe they can do it, and you got to give them chance after chance to do it. Now, obviously sometimes there are performance issues, but I think much more often we're too quick to give up on employees, and we're too slow to believe in them.
Yeah, and that starts with care, doesn't it? I mean, that the if you get to that root problem, you're talking about hiring. I mean, you've hired I mean, either you have hired a person who doesn't care
Right.
about people, they only
Right.
care about,
Right.
right?
Okay. Right.
Or they that's not expected of them. It's
Right.
not you've got a number to hit,
Right.
right? Don't tell me these excuses about your people and this person wants this and that person wants that.
Right.
Dave thinks that this metric is going down and that he wants to get to the, like, tell him to pick up the phone and make some effing phone calls, right?
That's right.
So even though that manager might care, they might like, damn, like, okay, I get that. I get why that would be really, frustrating for you or disheartening for you to be seeing something that, he wants to take a look at and nobody wants to hear about it. You only being told to make some more calls, make some more calls. I can see why that would they resonate with that. They care about that. And then they take that up to the manager, and the manager's like, he thinks what? Tell him to. Why don't you tell him to, right?
Right, right. Well, yeah. I mean, but on the belief thing, I agree. I mean, I also think that there's a dynamic there, and I think it starts with the leader. I think employees shouldn't have to earn your trust. You should trust them to begin with. Now they can undermine it over time, sure, but they're there. They got in the company. Somebody hired them for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
You should start by trusting them.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
my view.
Cool. And then inspired.
Yeah, so that's the last bit. That's in some ways the hardest bit, but I think ultimately that's what one of the most exciting things that leadership is really all about is inspiring people, providing sort of a context for the work in the broadest possible way, so that people feel like they're contributing to something that's meaningful beyond just the day-to-day effort. To me, that's when leadership becomes almost poetic, because I think that people need to feel that their work matters and it contributes to something.
And again, something that increasingly with younger generations, something that people want. They don't want to just go work for a corporation to make the corporation a ton of money, especially these days in this economy with, how people are feeling about injustices and inequity with younger generations, inflation, and not being able to afford the lifestyle that that the boomers enjoyed.
Exactly.
And
It's more important
so,
than ever.
yeah, so
It's more
no, people
important
are
than ever.
not interested in just running on that hamster wheel to support that.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's enduring. When I was young, my dad told me this joke. He said, "There's a guy who works at the circus, uh, picking up after the elephants. That's his job. He shovels after the elephants all day long, and at the circus. And someone says to him, 'You ever think about getting another job?' And he says, 'You mean quit show business?' Because to him, he's in show business. He's
Sure.
not just picking, right. And that everybody wants to feel that their work is important and that it's valuable and that it
Sure.
matters.
Yes.
And the reality is it does. And a good leader can, they can't make you feel like shoveling shit is gonna be change the world or show business, but they can provide that broader context, that more inspiring vision. So you're thinking about the work in the broadest possible terms.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I think that is what everybody wants. I have this belief that if you hire good people, good people who care just kind of in general in life, who care about other people, who care about the work that they do, and they have a craft that they've been practicing, that they're good at, and they just want opportunities to practice that craft to help, the team, help the organization to do what it's trying to do, and to make a good living at it, right? And to be able to provide and create the life that they want, practicing their craft and doing what they're good at.
Exactly.
How do we enable that? If we start with the belief that we're all on the same team, that we're all qualified to be here, that we all have something great to contribute, that we all care. If we just start with that, not everybody, is on that team and really wants to be on that team and really cares and all the rest of it, and they should be taken off the bus, I say. But if we start with the assumption that we've got the right people on the bus, smart people, good people, caring people, um, and and that we all want the same thing to help our customers and to make a great living doing it, then I think we need to resonate. What does that mean? Get on the same wavelength, right? Through communication, through technology, through processes, through training, through enablement. Get on the same wavelength about what matters, about what people want, about what individuals want, about what the company wants, about what the customers want. That's the way I see it.
I agree with you, man. Ultimately, I think that leads you to one place, which is that employees are the center of the business. It starts with employees and helping them to feel heard, valued, believed in, inspired.
Yeah.
Ultimately, is the most sustainable way to build a successful organization.
I agree. By doing that, you've created happy employees who care and desire to create happy customers,
Right.
whatever their role.
Right. Exactly.
Right on. Um, Adam, a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been really great
Hope
to
I
meet with
wasn't
you.
too wild for you.
You were so wild, Adam.